Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I am very happy to have my guest today. I consider her friend, but I have great admiration for Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse. She is the founder of the Ruth Institute. And she has, in my mind, been doing powerhouse work for, Jennifer, what, 10 years have you had the Ruth Institute? Longer?
2008, since 2008.
15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she is an author. I know at least one book that I can remember off the top of my head is The Sexual State. And I forget the tagline, but I know it's about fighting the sexual
They're on the
revolution.
shoulder. It's right over my shoulder right there.
Oh, there you go. Jennifer is an amazing woman who I love because she's a fighter. And she is a Catholic who is fighting against a lot of the handiwork of Satan. And I think that's just enough that I'll say. Before I say what I'd like to say, what is the Ruth Institute founded for, Jennifer?
So I founded the Ruth Institute in 2008, back when I lived in San Diego, and my kids were just starting to get a little bit older, and I could start doing stuff. I was not pinned down with the
Mommy
day-to-day,
stuff.
the day-to-day life of a mom. And I wanted to do something that would be encouraging to young women, that they could start their families and without worrying about their minds turning to mush and their careers falling apart, that it would be okay to start a family sometime before menopause, which has been kind of my failing. I thought, oh, I'll wait till I get tenure, and
Yeah.
that, is crazy. But anyway, that's what I thought I was going to do, Christine, because I knew that there were young women who wanted to hear that, who needed to hear that from an older woman.
Yeah.
But then in 2008, when I founded it, literally right when I founded it, Proposition 8 broke out in Southern California, in San Diego, and I was right there, and I knew all the people that were involved in it. And if you may remember, this was the California campaign to define marriage as a union of a man and a woman. I didn't feel I could sit on the sideline while that was being debated, because I could see I hadn't given a lot of thought to gay issues. I actually almost no, I hadn't thought about gay issues at all, really. I was concerned about children needing their parents, and how can you strengthen marriage so that kids can have their mom and dad for their whole childhood. That's really what I was thinking about. Um, and and that's what I wanted to convey to college age students, and that kind of thing, to help them make good life decisions so that they would be equipped to do that. But when Prop 8 came on the scene, I could see dimly, but I could intuit that if you redefined marriage to make it a genderless institution, you were going to end up weakening marriage. You were going to end up redefining parenthood, so that it would no longer be assumed that the function of marriage, the social purpose of marriage, whatever your private purpose is, we don't really care about your private purposes. The social purpose of marriage, the public purpose of marriage, is to attach mothers and fathers to their children and to one another. If you remove the gender requirement from marriage children to their parents is going to be undermined. And all of that I simply intuited in 2008. But as I went along and was debating this issue literally every week for quite a few years in the early days of the Ruth Institute, it just became more and more clear to me just what a profound change was being put into place. And no one was really talking about the fundamental issues. I can tell you for a fact, because I was in the middle of all these debates, Christine, that what we were allowed to talk about was whether gay people's feelings would be hurt. We were allowed to talk about gay people's feelings. We were allowed to talk about whether I was a mean person. And even the people on our side didn't want to go too deeply into some of these questions, in part because if you say kids need their own mom and their own dad, and they need mom and dad to stay together, now you've opened up the floodgates to talking about divorce. And you've got your donor class who have been your conservative donor class, where the guys have been married 3 times, or maybe they have an IVF grandchild, or all these things that they didn't really want to talk about, but I felt needed to be talked about. So that's how I got started. That's where I am now. Now I'm old enough that women are looking to me for advice about their married life. It's very heartwarming to me. So it's like I've come full circle to talking more about some of those issues of, yeah, go ahead, go for it, start your family, get on with it, but the gay stuff has taken up all the air in the room, and now the trans stuff has taken up all the air in the room. And so I don't feel like I can't in good conscience ignore all that stuff. So that's me. That's Ruth Institute. I try to be transparent. What you see is what you get, pretty
Yeah.
much.
That's why I love you. I love your work. I just think everybody should go to ruthinstitute.org. Yes?
.org. Mm-hmm.
.org. So go there. We'll have the link is right here below the show. And before I do again get to the topic, funnily, is that a real word? Funnily, I did a show recently that said Mary Young. It was just a 10-minute one. Mary
Yeah.
Young. And I talked about the experts like Dr. Joe Malone, who talked about the fertility and your most fertile days are before you're 20 years old and so on and so forth. And the two shall be as one happens more easily when you marry young than when you've married at 40 and you've established yourself, so on and so forth. You would think that I lopped off the Easter Bunny's head. They were like, what? You should know who you are and go out into the world and become all you need to become. Live your life, experiment, and then marry.
From people who are married, maybe not.
Married, divorced,
1.7 children.
no kids, all that stuff.
1.7 children.
2.7 or less at this point.
1.7. No, 1.7. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it used to be 2.1 and now it's 1.7.
Well, college educated women have fewer children. I mean, you postpone your fertility, you're going to have fewer kids. And that's a little something that I talk about in the sexual state. The population control people, this is a little known fact. The population control people did not get any traction in saying there are too many people in the world, we must do something. Everybody's like, you guys are creeps, stop, it's terrible. As soon as they started, they figured out the formula, Christine. John D. Rockefeller III figured out that if he talked about female empowerment and women going to college and women having careers, that he could accomplish all of his objectives without ever
in one fell swoop.
Without ever uttering the term population control, which is what he really wanted, of course. He had no problem going to third world countries and going snip, snip to people's organs, but, paying for that to be done. But starting in 1974, there's a speech, where he, it's the big breakthrough speech. Oh, look, now he's a feminist. Isn't this great? It's like, oh. And so now it's a fact that in all the developed countries of the world, if you ask women, how many children do you want? And then at the end of their reproductive years, you ask them, how many children did you end up having? They never have as many as they want. On average, in every country of every developed country, women end up with fewer children than they say they wanted. And we're supposed to be okay with that. We're all supposed to be okay with that. And I can tell you, having experienced infertility or what do they call it? Impaired fertility or subnormal fertility, something like that. It's painful. It is really painful. There's a lot of heartbreak behind that number. And these guys, they just keep pumping the money in it and pumping the propaganda.
I heard recently it's coming out publicly. I've heard some of these cultural elites say, this is the number that shocked me. I knew they wanted to decrease population, but I thought I was hearing numbers that said down to 6 billion. Recently, I've heard at least 2 cultural elites say 1 billion. 1 billion.
Who is saying that, Christine?
I knew you'd say that, and I'm trying to remember which one it was, and that's why I'm trying to keep my mouth shut until it comes to my head.
Okay. But after the show, put it in the link.
I will do that. I will find the link and I will put it in here. 1 billion people. Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah. So I wanted to start the show with Jennifer saying,
I wonder which ones they're going to pick out.
Well, I said, start with yourself. Start with your kids. But of course they won't do that.
Right.
Because they're smarter and they know more.
And they're more deserving of life.
And desirable. And perfect because they're rich. And they don't know God. Oh, but they made themselves God. Sarcasm noted, right?
He's in the way. God's in the way. We got to get rid of him.
Yeah. So one of the ways that they're trying to get God out of the way is by kind of erasing Easter. Happy Easter, my sister. Did you enjoy your Easter? Oh, you didn't celebrate Easter. What did you celebrate?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. According to the Biden administration, we're supposed to be celebrating Trans Visibility Day. Woo! Like they're not face enough. Like they're not. in our faces enough when they need further visibility. Yeah.
I have never seen a group as small as they are have more visibility than they do. And the social contagion that has been caught
Yeah.
by the push for this disordered lifestyle is just that's why we're doing this show. We have got to start waking people up because
Mhm.
I'll let you say all the things that you need to say, but when you intentionally, and many of the media, Catholic media people out there have said this already, but to intentionally make the proclamation on Easter Sunday, the holiest day of the year for Christians, and a Sunday when our politicians should be at home sleeping, or they waited until that day. That was intentional
Mhm.
to say trans visibility, and I see nothing but the hands of Satan on
Mhm.
that. What
Well, it's
sayeth you?
interesting, isn't it? We're pretty sure that Joe Biden is not competent to be running the
He's
country,
not.
right? He's not mentally competent, and I feel absolutely no compunction about saying that. I mean, I think any intelligent person can tell
Yeah.
that he's not mentally capable, and the people who are actually running the country are not going to show themselves, I think. And so I think until they do show themselves, I'm perfectly okay saying that the person who's ultimately running the country is the father of lies, the murderer from the beginning. He's the one who's running the country. And until you guys are willing to show us otherwise, I'm just going to go with the father of lies is running things. That's my
Why did you want to talk about this? Because you're doing something at the Ruth Institute.
yes, yes, yes,
Do you
yes.
want to
Well,
tell us?
yeah, well, I want to say a couple things about the Transvisibility Day. First of all, you're completely correct that they did not have to do it on Easter. You will hear in the media, oh, it's always been on March 31st. Excuse me, I never heard of it before. So even if you guys have been celebrating this quietly for years, you could have switched it up and nobody would have been the wiser. Okay, so just don't give me that. No, I'm not accepting that. The other thing they did is they had the annual Easter egg roll on the White House lawn and stuff, and the kids were allowed to bring their, to do coloring and do art projects and whatnot, but they were told in advance that they could not have any religious symbols as part of their project. And so I'm like, well, are you guys aware that Easter is a religious holiday? I mean, why are you even having an Easter event if you don't?
My blood boils as you're saying
You
it.
know,
I just
so that there's
mhm.
all of that. But also I went and read the proclamation and I thought it was going to be some kind of boilerplate, two sentences. We love trans people. We're wonderful. Everyone who doesn't love you is awful. The end. That's what I was expecting to see. Well, no, it's as long as your arm, Christine. It is a laundry list of public policies that they intend to enact in order to support and love our trans brothers and sisters, or no, they don't say trans brothers and sisters. What do they say? I forget how
Trans
they,
people, I believe,
well,
because
yeah, I forget
there's
exactly.
more than two genders.
But the thing is, you start reading this, you scroll down on the screen and you go, how long does this go on? Because we're going to do this about education, and we're going to do that about transportation, and we're going to do this about passports, and we're going to do this about Veterans Affairs, and then we're going to do this over here, and this in public education, and this in public employment, and we're going to do all these things. And it's like this. And so here's what they're really doing, and this is what I want people to, you heard it here first, folks, but let this percolate, because this is a big thing I'm about to say. The idea that a man can become a woman or a woman can become a man, of course, we know is impossible. You can call yourself anything you want, you can dress any way you want, but you cannot become the opposite sex. This is not possible. And so what they're saying is we are committed to making it possible for people to pretend that they've done this impossible thing. And we are going to make that possible in every area of society. This is our agenda. Okay. So what that means is that they are saying it's a high moral duty and obligation that we do everything possible to do the impossible. Right. And so therefore, this is a blank check. They're writing themselves a blank check to grab unlimited power over your life and mine, spend unlimited amounts of money, pump tons and tons of propaganda at you, which, and now that I'm saying this, you all recognize that this is true. They're already doing all this stuff. But this proclamation spells it out, kind of department by department almost, what they're planning to do to make it seem like these men who say they're women really are women. I mean, that's as simple as I can make it.
And since you just said that, one of the things that I noticed that I don't see talked about as much directly is when we're talking about trans people, we're hearing a lot more about men pretending to be women than the other way around. And that is because men are invading women's spaces. Men are taking up women's sports. Women don't want to compete in men's sports. So when they, and they're going to lose anyway. So
Oddly enough,
it
yeah.
really is about the absolute paradox to feminism, or to true feminism, true Catholic feminism, which is celebrating the femininity of a woman. You've got men coming into our space and saying, no women's rights, no femininity, you can be anything you are. We'll conquer all your sports, we'll come into all your spaces, we can still rape you, we can still impregnate you. You're just not hearing it so much about the women who think they're men.
But where you do hear a lot about it, Christine, are the vulnerable teenage girls, okay? Who have been convinced through a variety of means that we could talk about, but they've become convinced that the solution to the problems of teenage angst and puberty is to stop being a woman. If you just change your sex, that's going to solve your problems. And many of these procedures will leave them sterile. So, there again is your depopulation of agenda, right? That we've got something to convince women to sterilize themselves, really for no good reason. There's no reason for somebody to be doing that. The other thing I want to point out about the word trans, recently I had a couple of columns in the National Catholic Register. I'm a regular columnist over there, and I had a 2-part series on this whole question of what does the word trans even mean. And what I spelled out there is, look, the definition of trans is that it is subjective. Okay, a transgender is an umbrella term. This is from the APA. This is not me. This is your profession, girlfriend, right? The APA is saying that that the word transgender is an umbrella term covering anyone whose sense of gender identity or behavior or expression is not typical for the sex that they were born.
Organs that they were born.
Yeah, it's somehow atypical. Your internal sense of self does not align with the sex.
Your external self.
You're the sex that you were born. So your internal sense of self, you got to think about that. That's completely internal, completely subjective. There's no way to verify it, confirm or deny it. If I say I'm a man, you have to accept that. I could have all kinds of reasons that I want to say that, right? And some of the men that you were alluding to who are saying they're women, they have reasons that are not very nice, right? The men who, the convicted rapists who all of a sudden decide that they're really women, they want to be housed in women's prisons so that they won't be raped by men in the men's prison. This is their story. And of course, they're assaulting women. You've got now pregnancies happening inside women's prisons and this kind of stuff. They're lying, okay? And you can't, the definition is simply subjective. There's no grounds for saying you aren't really trans, you're just making that up. Well, I say this is how I feel. There's nothing to go on, And so that the reason I'm kind of jumping up and down about this, I want to caution your listeners, and your viewers to think about it before you use the word trans. Be aware that it can mean at least 8 different things. In this article, I spelled out like 8 very different kinds of people who've pinned that label on themselves for whatever reason, right? Different reasons, different people, different psyche, for why they're calling themselves trans. And now you're going to reshape all of society to accommodate all of those people somehow, sort of. They can't all be equally accommodated, when you get right down to it. Chloe Cole has nothing in common with Richard Levine, who calls himself Rachel. They have nothing in common with each other, you know? What exactly are you going to do that's going to accommodate them both? You know,
Right. And
like
for those of you that don't know,
impossible.
Chloe Cole is a young lady who was confused and convinced that she was a male and needed to transition, had her breasts cut off, and that was at the age of what, do you remember, 15?
15. Yeah,
And then she already transitioned back before or at the age of 18, I believe.
that's right. She just turned 19. She turned 19 the day she testified in Congress that she was, you know, that of what it meant to her to make this
Yeah.
mistake and to realize that it was a mistake, and the physical problems that she had and so on and so forth from attempting to live like a boy, you know, from and mutilating parts of her body and all the rest of it. You know, the idea that you got one set of policies is going to somehow serve her and also serve Bruce Jenner, you know, come on, guys.
Right.
You
And
can't be
Richard Levine.
serious. You know, come on. You can't really be thinking. But they're not thinking. I mean, really, this is a destabilizing agenda. This is an agenda that says everything you think you know, you don't know. You know, you think
Right.
you're a woman, but you're not really. You know, you think you're a man. You think you're married to a man, but he could turn around any day and say he's really a woman and leave you and leave your kids and demand that everybody call him, you know, Loretta or whatever it is, you know, and we're going to side with the guy who's abandoning his family and wants to be called Loretta, you know.
Well, and it's so much in line with what was written in the Rules for Radicals
Hmm.
by why do I don't write these things down because it's in my head, and then as soon as I have to say it publicly, it leaves my head. The
Saul
Communist Manifesto,
Alinsky.
Saul Alinsky.
Saul Alinsky. Yeah.
Yeah, separate children from their parents, educate them young so that you can put your morality in and not the parents' morality. Therefore, get the mothers working so that the children can go to school, so that we can feed their minds. Then you're looking at these cases that are going to court in the justice system in various states where parents are losing rights to their biological children because they refuse to call them the false gender, and they stand by calling their child by their own biological genders. It's just, again, so diabolical, and all of this is an assault against truth. If we can take away your thoughts that any truth exists, then we can take away your thoughts that God exists, because God is truth and God doesn't change. I think it was very strategic that God put right in Genesis, the first chapter, he made them male and female. And female, male and female, he made them, period. He just put those two. Who'd have thought?
Who would have thought we need to be reminded at this point? But
And that's serious without sarcasm. I've read that for, 59 years. And it just in the past 5, it's like he made them male and female.
right, right. And you know, John Paul, the late great Saint John Paul II, tried to help us, and he has helped us, and we haven't really, you know, made full use of it yet or incorporated all of it. But when he talked about the theology of the body, Christian, what he's really talking about is that the fact that God made us male and female, the fact that we reproduce through a loving act that is performed typically face to face between one man and one woman, all those facts, God is revealing something to us about himself and about us, you know, and to really plumb the depths of that, you are so correct to observe the very first chapter, male and female, and marriage, right? God instituted marriage in the first, you know, opening chapters. And then how does scripture end? You know how sacred scripture ends, with
Ends with the feast of the wedding feast of the Lamb.
the wedding feast of the Lamb, you know. So and you know, that's another thing that some of us intuited during Prop 8 and during the debates over marriage, that if we lose marriage, we're going to lose the ability to make the Christian message understandable and intelligible, you know, because the meaning of fatherhood changes, the meaning of marriage changes. People, there's a lot at stake, and we were
Mhm.
continually, I feel that we were continually that people were trying to divert us from looking at the fundamental issues that were at stake in the marriage debate. They would much rather we talk about, you know, whether gay people are going to be unhappy, or the latest study that had 50 children and proved that children are fine. That's what we got to talk about. When really there were some very deep issues at stake about the cosmos itself.
Yeah, my daughter was telling me yesterday about the TV show Sister Wives, which I don't follow, but the man had 4 or 5 wives, and then he kind of found a very young one and pushed the original wives aside and really focused on this young one. And I think at least one of them divorced. I don't watch the show, but he had such an attraction to this young woman and the young children produced by that it was very public that one of the kids from the older from the first wives are struggling. And then one of the young sons, I think my daughter said he's 23, just killed himself, committed suicide because he had such a hard time. Of course, people will say that's not it, but if we're supposed to be painting this idyllic picture, these struggles are very, very real. You and I have a mutual acquaintance, Katie Faust, who wrote the book. I have it sitting right over here, which of course is going to escape my brain, the name, about the children.
Them before us.
Before us.
Them
And
before
she
us.
was born to a woman who left her husband for a lesbian lifestyle, as was I. My mom did the same thing. And in there, she also talks about the problems associated with these types of lifestyles that supposedly, if we will just celebrate trans and homosexuals, then everybody would be okay. But Father Paul Sullins did some fantastic research that showed when homosexuals come together, by any standard, mom and dad together in the house is the best producing. But when you have two women or two men raising the household, this outcomes are poorer for the children. And then the part that really struck me was that when the gay couple marries, that's actually even worse for the children, the outcomes and the children's mental health. So I was like, wow. And so going back to the statement we said earlier, truth, truth. And I think, wow, when my mom left my dad for a woman and she said, oh, this is just my best friend, I was allowed to lie to myself and say, it's just my mom's best friend. I didn't have to admit the fact that she was a lesbian. Had my mother entered a fake marriage with this person, that would have had quite a trauma on me, because then I would have had to face the truth of it. So I know we're talking a little bit more about like the Transgender Visibility Day and what's going on in our nation, our leaders, but all of this is in the same package, that we have to deal with all of this lack of truth and great confusion.
And avoidance of truth, actual hatred of truth. I can't let the name Paul Sullins go by without taking some credit for Father Paul Sullins, because
you gave him to me.
What's that?
You introduced him to me.
Yeah, well, he's a senior research fellow here at the Ruth Institute. And when he came to me and we started talking, the reason we were drawn to each other is because that's the work he was working on at that time, is the work having to do with outcomes for children of same-sex couples. But since that time, in addition to all of that stuff, and, in the years that he's worked with us, he has produced research on clergy sex abuse, showing beyond any shadow of a doubt that it's strongly, strongly correlated with homosexuality, right? I mean, everybody wants to deny that, everybody wants to dodge that, but if you read his stuff, you can't dodge it anymore.
I believe it was 87%.
No, if you look at, well, it's about the early numbers from the John Jay report. We're going super nerd here, everybody. Sorry about this. Even back in the John Jay report, they knew that about 85% of the victims were teenage boys. Okay, so that's homosexuality. That's not pedophilia.
They were fully developed male bodies, was the point of it.
They're
pederasty.
Post-pubescent boys.
Correct.
So not infants or something like that. So but the other number that he looked at was a correlation between the percentage of men in the priesthood who claim a homosexual identity and the percentage of clergy sex abuse, the rates of clergy sex abuse, and it's like 97%. It's 97%. Wait,
great. So 97% of them.
So if this is time series data. If you look at a year, when of the clergy, 80% of them say that they're gay, you're going to have, every time you increase the amount of guys who say they're gay, you will, with 97% probability, have more victims, have more have higher numbers, not just higher percentage of male victims, but more victims. He's done a lot of interesting stuff. He's tracked it through, looking at the years that you went to seminary, or the year of ordination, I think it was. The years of ordination, there are like 2 big waves that are causing all the problems. Yeah, or, not all, but like
vast majority of the problems.
lion's share of the problem are coming from 2 cohorts, different stuff like that. And if people were really interested, they would be looking at that and scratching their heads and going, what are we going to do? And but other people don't, they don't want to
So
deal
much of this,
with
Jennifer,
it.
is forced blindness. I have a family member who I love very much and who had always loved me. And when this family member saw that she thinks she's a man, so she calls herself a male name, and she's had the top surgery. And when she saw my first podcast that made known my perspective, that, she is still a she. I didn't even talk about her, but this issue that we're talking about, that I have a conservative perspective that aligns with truth. She blocked me. Her siblings blocked me. Her parents blocked me. This is after they all attacked me publicly on one of my social media channels, which I don't want to say which one because I don't want to make it easier for people to find it. And so it aches my heart because of my deep love for this group, this whole family group. And what I was told is that the mother of this young lady said, if anybody doesn't agree with me, I'm just unfriending him and blocking him. And I thought to myself, is that how you live your life? Let's take this issue out. But if someone disagrees with me, I'm going to plug my ears and say, nah, boom, boom, I don't want to listen to you. I want to arrogantly hold only onto my own perspectives. And I think taken in the larger picture, we're seeing that. And we're seeing that with our censorship. Anyone who doesn't have that opinion is shut down. We're seeing the media avoidance of the topic. You are just not allowed to hear the truth. So people who really are truth seekers are being they're not allowed to find this information. They're being stonewalled. And that's a problem. And that's part of why you and I are doing this. And hopefully the show will be on all the channels that I uploaded. I know for sure it won't get censored yet on Rumble. It will also be on my Facebook, or excuse me, my Breakfast with Bacon page. But there's at least 2 social media that I don't know may perhaps censor this because of this very powerful and sensitive topic you and I are talking about. You've been censored for these topics, haven't you?
Oh gosh, yes. Gosh, I'm surprised I'm still allowed to say anything, to be honest.
Yeah.
I keep saying to myself, oh, I wish I had a bigger audience. And then I'm like, if I had a bigger audience, they'd just shut me up. So whatever. I'm just gonna put it out there and let it be whatever it's gonna be, and
But you have a deep faith.
Yeah, the hope that the people who need the information are going to find it. That's really kind of how I look at it. But see, look, if what you're doing is promoting something that's truth can stand on its own, but something untrue has to be continually propped up, right? So, and I talk about this in The Sexual State. I talk about this. I figured this out when I was debating gay marriage. If you build a society around the idea that sex makes babies, that point of view will be affirmed by data on a regular basis. You are going to get evidence. Oh yeah, look at that. The baby, Or if you build society around the idea children need their parents, you will be affirmed in that view. That the data is going to come in and confirm and go, yep, they sure do. And we're not there, or we're preoccupied, or we're being mean to each other or something. It affects them. Oh yeah, But if you're trying to do the opposite, if you're trying to say the sex of the body doesn't matter, men and women really are the same, there's nothing really there, it's nothing substantial, well, you're going to face contradictory information to that all the time. You look across the breakfast table and your husband is maybe the same species, I don't know, sometimes questionable, right? I mean, you're going to see these differences between men and women, and you're going to see that kids need their parents, and that sex really makes babies. And trying to build a society around the opposite of that, you have to constantly prop it up. And that means tamping down the contrary evidence. So maybe you had this experience as a working mother. You take your child to daycare. Your child is crying. You're crying. You don't really want to leave your baby at daycare. And other mothers are crying. And some mothers are like, they've steeled themselves and they're okay and they get by it and stuff. But the fact is, women want to take care of their babies.
Yeah.
They might want respite from it. But the idea that you're going to be more satisfied in an office doing wills and trusts or writing,
Working
doing
in a credit union like I did.
bookkeeping for strangers, that's going to make you more happy. Women are going to go, no, this is not working. So you have to tamp down all the time, all the contrary evidence. And that's why you see these crazy human interest stories where women come and, they interview somebody and I'm 45 years old and I have no children and I have the best life ever. And you think to yourself,
No, you don't.
why is this news? I mean, even if it's true, maybe it's true. I don't know if it's true, but why is it news? Why do we need to be told this? Well, we need to be told this because she is tamping down. She is contradicting the evidence that's in front of everybody's faces, right? That the relationships you build are really the key to happiness. That aloneness doesn't really work for anyone, really. But open marriage, Christine, people were talking about open marriage in the 70s. I knew people who tried this. It never worked. Never.
I have so many clients that tried and they all come to me saying, what was I thinking? And they're miserable.
Yeah, and they're still, and the elites, the ruling class still pops this stuff out. Oh, look, here's another human interest story. It's like,
yeah. And this leads into really what I was going to say, and you're pointing into it, is when you try to cloud truth, other lies start spiraling out, like something you've alluded to, this idea of MAPS, minor attracted people. Don't say pedophiles. Let's just make this normal. I think of all these things. I had a client recently, and the spouse thinks that he's trans. So, okay, that's something we're starting here. But he also believes, and I've heard of these things, but now I've dealt with a real client with this real issue. He is a furry. And I've read those things, but again, there's always this element of not real people, right? So there are actually furry conventions, people who think they're furries.
So tell people what that means exactly.
I didn't go to the website because I've heard so much, but it's a certain type of creature that is not human. I think it came from a television show, kind of like Gremlins in the past, but furries are just a non-human species of entities, and they have their own ways of thinking and their own ways of making noises, or purring or whatever they choose to do. But it is their own level of reality that is different from what everyone else sees as reality, from truth.
Yeah.
And people condone it now by having these conventions where they allow people to believe that they are also furries. And look, you're a furry too. This must be true.
Which is, it could be as harmless as a Star Trek convention, but it's not.
Right.
But it's not, right? I mean, and I think the reason is that when people go to a Star Trek convention, they don't really think they're Mr. Spock because they pasted on the ears.
No, right.
But the people who think they're furries think they were born that way.
Yeah.
I think that's what they think. I've been pondering.
I hesitate going to some of those sites because I don't want to get
so how do you help this person, Christine?
So I'm working with the wife. And so I teach truth. I teach God. I teach, how do you carry this cross? You never lie to people. You never, because she was to this perspective of maybe if I went with him to one of these conventions, he'd love me more, or maybe he'd understand that I support him. And so one of the things I do is I always start with truth. And a phrase that I've been telling a lot of people lately, done some videos on, is only do what you know to be true and right and leave the consequences to God. So if your spouse is in fact a human, you do not allow them to believe they're furries. So it's showing, how do you show love and empathy? I still love you. I will always love you. You are the man that I love. I will not call you a furry. but if you believe that's what you are, it won't make me love you less. So just
Mhm.
kind of reaffirming who they are. And
Yeah,
if they don't like that, give the consequences to God. You
right,
stand on truth.
right, right. Do you know, that reminds me of my friend Charlene Cothran,
Mm.
lived as a lesbian for years. Do you know Charlene? I feel
I
like,
do. I do.
yeah. Um, I did it. She was one of the very first people I interviewed on my show, and people are still watching her interview from like 4 years ago or something, because she left the lesbian lifestyle. And one of the most moving things she talks about is her mom, and how her mom never gave up on her, how her mom knew all along, all these things Charlene thought she was keeping from her mom knew, and her mom was, consistently praying for her, all right along, and not going along with her stuff. And I've heard this from trans people too, ex-trans people, that this relative or that relative, they didn't go along with my stuff, but I knew they loved me, and I was really kind of glad they didn't go along with my stuff, because it meant I had an anchor. But while it was all going on, of course, they couldn't admit that, or at least not. You know what I mean?
And ultimately, they're the person you go to. I've had people that don't like me because I have a view different than theirs. But when they're looking for real truth, they come to me and say something to the effect of maybe about a different subject, right? I knew if I came to you, you'd give me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So they may not condone the fact that they think they're a man, I think they're a woman, and they know that we disagree on that. We won't talk about that. But they still come to me and say, I know you'll give it to me straight.
Mm-hmm.
So they know. And
Right.
you just, if I gave any instruction to anyone out there, is be love, be love. And love is not only patient and kind and not rude and all those things, but if Christ is love, Christ is truth.
Right. Right.
Speak the truth in love. Give the consequences to God. You
Mm-hmm.
can't control everyone. You can only control yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
that's very important in this day and age, because I think for you and me and the subject we're talking about, ultimately that's our marching orders, because it's gotten so crazy and so convoluted and so out of control that all we can do is stand on truth. And I think one last thing is that God is allowing that to happen, because he's saying when it gets so big and so crazy that I'm the only one that can fix it. That's the when you finally realize you need me. I've
Mm-hmm.
got this. And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of stop controlling it yourself. All right, Lord, I give this to you. So you're doing something about all of this. And you are doing at the Ruth Institute Adult Appreciation Day. Is this
Yeah.
true?
Yes.
I
Yes.
love
Yes.
it.
So it occurred to me, Trans Visibility Day, you think about the range of people who call themselves trans. You do have your confused teenagers, who are really hurting and who deserve tremendous empathy and respect.
Yeah.
Um, and then you also have your autogynephile men, and you have your pretenders and your predators who are using the trans label for reasons of their own, and they're using these kids as human shields. To me, um, uh, how can you say anything mean about me? I'm a trans person. They're trans people. How can you be mean to them? Well, they're not. You're not really the same people, but what seems to be central to the desire to live in untruth is a kind of narcissism, a kind of self-centeredness. This is my truth, and I demand. It's not enough for you to say, I'll have my truth, you have your truth. No, we're way past that. That
Yes.
train left the station a long time ago. This is my truth, and I demand that you live in accordance with my truth. And there's no solution to that problem except the law of the strongest, right? When it comes down to
Yeah.
conflict, it's going to be
It's
resolved.
like formalized bullying.
Yes, it's going to be resolved by force. So what we're doing is cultivating self-centeredness in a very radical way. We're cultivating self-centeredness and self-delusion, and a lot of things. So anyway, as I was reflecting on it, it's like, there are a lot of people who deserve visibility. What about the people who go about their business doing what they're supposed to do without whining and complaining and demanding to be the center of attention all the time? Why don't we pay attention to them? And you start thinking about, the virtues we aren't cultivating, the virtues we're actively denigrating. and say, this is just mature adulthood, responsible adulthood. So yes, we're going to on April 3rd, we're going to issue a proclamation calling it Adult Appreciation Week, announcing Adult Appreciation Week, and we're going to be having posts on all of our social media sites that you can use to honor those that you feel are adults whom you appreciate, who are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Give them visibility.
And make them visible because they deserve to be visible. So yeah, that's what we're up to.
I love it. Can you read some of the things that are
Sure.
worthy, some of the
Sure.
virtues?
So I'll just read the proclamation here. I just happen to have it here. In light of the Biden White House's announcement of Transgender Day of Visibility, the Ruth Institute discerned the need for an additional holiday. Transgender people are not the only ones who need and deserve visibility. Therefore, the Ruth Institute will observe Adult Appreciation Week from April 3rd through Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. We will honor adults who put their personal interests aside for the common good, who take responsibility for their mistakes, who support their families, even by doing unpleasant jobs, who tell the truth. That's you, Christine. We honor adults who tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient. We honor adults who are in command of themselves, their impulses, and their egos. We honor adults who wouldn't dream of cheating others out of their justly earned awards. We honor adults who do not knowingly mislead children. We honor adults who protect the innocence of children and who present children with models of self-command, truthfulness, and fair play. We honor adults who help children aspire to and achieve lives of responsible adulthood. We honor the adults who face discrimination and ridicule for living up to their adult duties of protecting the weak and the vulnerable. We honor adults who face the loss of their jobs rather than cooperate with evil. In short, we honor adults who meet their responsibilities in the face of criticism without complaint and without the need for constant attention or affirmation.
And this is why I love the Ruth Institute. You guys have a vision, you are intuitive, and you do things, and you're very proactive about them. And we need people to join really in the work that you're doing, because I think people watch and like, what can I do? What can I do? I think most of it, you just said right there, it's visibility.
Yeah.
Right? Let's make visible these good things that are still happening and the good people that are doing these virtuous things, and remind others that you're not alone. I mean, that's what I'm
Yes.
getting from this. You're not standing alone.
Yes.
I think you're still standing with the majority. It's just that the minority is so loud.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you're filling the world with untruth, it's destabilizing for people. It's hard to keep your rudder, when there's all of this, kind of bombardment with these euphemisms. For example, the sexual revolution has always specialized in euphemisms, and every time you turn around, there's some new phrase like the sex assigned at birth. I mean, that is garbage, and
Right.
they must be, Christine. They must have professional marketing people testing these slogans and focus grouping them and all that kind of stuff. They must have. I don't know that for a fact, but don't you think it has that vibe? I mean, you're a communication person.
Absolutely. And it's funny because as a communication person, you look at when the government or other organizations, agencies try to really institute their system of lies and things. I think about recently the government. I know Nancy Pelosi had tried to read one of the proclamations that was made that said, do not use standard gender pronouns. And as she was reading, she kept going back to the standard gender pronouns and catching herself. So you can't run from truth, because truth is always going to be there. And the mind gets confused when you try to, wait, what? So I think all of what is happening here is just that people can sit back and watch and let it unravel. But it's a very proactive thing that we
You've
should
got to
do.
be proactive. Look, listen, here's the thing. The sexual revolution is intrinsically irrational, but it's also intrinsically seductive, Christine. And here's what I mean. The sexual revolution promises that you can do anything you want sexually, you can be anyone you want sexually, and nothing bad will happen.
No consequences.
Nothing bad's going to happen to you. Nothing bad's going to happen to anybody around you. That's the promise. Okay. And
Mhm.
so, oh my gosh, that's really seductive. Everyone would like to believe that that's true. And so, what that means to you and to me and to all of your listeners is that you have got to be intentional and proactive. Like you said, Christine, you've got to be proactive. You've got to be intentional. If you're not intentional, you're going to be swept away.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, it's going to sweep you away
You
because
or your children or your grandchildren.
oh, you could lose your children in a heartbeat. Lots of people we hear, oh, I tell you, I hear from so many heartbroken parents and grandparents, you know, we're their refuge, you know, and often it's not their fault. They didn't, you know, maybe they couldn't have done any, you know, what could I have done? I don't
Yeah.
know, I don't know, you know,
What are
but
some of the traumatizing things that you're hearing most often? Parent just losing children that leave their lives or go
oh,
someplace else or
there's estrangement, but there's also not complete estrangement, but a separation in values, you know. So, you know, the child thinks they're the opposite sex. That's the most recent stuff, and of course the most traumatic. But all the way along, you think about it. I mean, I'll hear from people, you know, of my age group. You know, we had 10 children. We raised them all in the faith, and only 2 of them are married. Only 2 of them are still in the faith. You know, that kind of thing.
right?
These parents didn't do anything wrong. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't, I seriously doubt that they did anything. So that's kind of the first phase. And now we're where the parents are expected to accept the fact that they're not married, but they're living together and they have children together and that they're splitting up and, you know, partnering and repartnering. We're expected to accept all that. And that's all of that's bad enough. But now you're expected to accept the idea that you're never going to have grandchildren because your daughter had her uterus removed or your son decided, you know,
Yeah,
to have bottoms or to have himself
right,
castrated,
right.
to have himself castrated. That's the truthful language, the non-euphemistic language. The mistakes that kids can make are more catastrophic and harder to recover from than the crazy, stupid stuff that we did in the 70s, you know?
Yeah, that
And
is
that
so
was bad
true.
enough. What we did was bad enough, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Well, so we have a link in the show notes to the Adult Visibility Day for Ruth Institute, but I do suggest you go there and join Dr. Morse in many of the projects that they are doing, and it's mostly to get truth out into our culture in proactive ways. And we need your help. She needs your help. I do. I know that they are a 501c3 as well. So if you could help them spread the word. If you, I say this all the time, there's some people feel like I can't be visible. I can't say any of this stuff. Well, she can. Give them the money and let them speak where you feel that you're not equipped to do so. Someone's got to give a voice to these people who need truth. And if you can help, I'm not ashamed of asking for money to support them. I love the work that they're doing. That's why I'm honored that Jennifer is on the show today. Tell us a little bit more of the work that they're doing these days. Jennifer, any other last things that you think our viewers need to know
well,
regarding this topic?
one last thing that I'll mention is that we have a report called Refuting the Top 5 Gay Myths. And the top one is that people are born gay. And we're very involved in the worldwide debate and conversation over so-called conversion therapy. And you know, that's another big mess that the sexual revolutionaries are causing.
Right.
But if you come over to the Ruth Institute, if you sign up for our newsletter, we will send you that report for free. And you can see all the data that we have there. It's a little 30-page report. And it'll come immediately to your inbox. You know how those things do, how you
Mm-hmm.
the link and you get it, you download it. Um, but it's filled with a combination of quoting scientific studies, statistical research, and also stories of people who have actually, whose lives illustrate in some way the truth of things, right? That people are not born gay, people change, they change all the time, you know, that kind of stuff. So there's a combination of stories plus science, and I think a lot of people will be blessed by that.
And I love the brochures that you put out. Again, I'm a fan of this because I do deal with a lot of people who say, Christine, I can't be bold like you. Can't do it. You have a lot of brochures out on the truth about in vitro fertilization, the truth about divorce. What are some of those brochures, and then how can they get
Yes.
them?
Yeah, you can easily get those at the store page, you know, at the Ruth Institute org. I got a pamphlet called Children in Divorce, which goes through some of the traumatic things that kids experience, or the risk factors, the things that the kids are at risk for as a result of divorce. Children in same-sex parenting, children and third-party reproduction and artificial reproductive techniques. You know, there's a whole list of
Yeah.
physical risks attached to that nobody talks about, and then plus some of the psychological risks associated with as well.
So get a stack of brochures.
Yeah,
When you
there
go to a
go.
conference, when you go to your church, my church gave me permission to put them out. I had them out. As a matter of fact, as I'm speaking, I realize I need to get some more, but put them in places where you think people may need to see the information. I have a family member that's considering purchasing a child through sperm donation.
Wow.
And I'm having a hard time convincing her that it will be traumatizing. And, you know, her and her mother's example or argument is, well, it's maybe 1 in a million. All the rest of them are probably fine. So sometimes when you get these brochures from an outside source, say, read this, it can help, but that's the best you can do. Let the Ruth Institute be the voice that you always may not feel that you are. So Jennifer, name one thing you'd have our viewers do differently as a result of something we talked about today.
Well, I want to endorse what you said, which is speak the truth. You know, don't go along with the half-truths. The problem with a half-truth is that no one really knows which half is the half that's true, you know, and so it's important to speak the truth as consistently as you can, and go aim for clarity.
Yeah. Okay, one more thing. It's a fill in the blank.
Okay, fill in the blank.
Fill in the blank. When I die, I will know my life has been a success if.
Oh, you're asking me
I'm
personally?
asking you to fill that in. Yeah, for your personal life.
Um, I'd rather not, actually. I have an answer that I prefer not to share publicly, if that's okay.
That is fair.
Okay.
I like your boldness. So, all right. Well, those of you that have been watching, please share the show with your friends and family. Go to the Ruth Institute, ruthinstitute.org. It's not right? It's just ruthinstitute.org, right?
That's right.
And you can find these brochures we've been talking about. You can find this proclamation, the Adult Visibility Day. Let's do this. Get it through April 9th, and then take it past April 9th and start paying attention to really who are the important, I don't want to say who are the important people because everyone's important, but what are the values that we are pushing in our society? Also, if you want, sign up for her newsletter, but please sign up for mine as well. Go to breakfastwithbacon.com. I have said this on consecutive podcasts that the way censorship is very real, you aren't going to be able to be a passive recipient of this information for much longer. So sign up for the newsletters of mine, I'm just going to call you Ruth, Jennifer's, and any of the organizations that you count on to give you the truth. Sign up, because when you're not seeing their podcasts, you will at least get the information from them until that is taken away too. Do not be passive, be active. Also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, and I think I'm missing at least one. And of course here on YouTube. What was that?
YouTube, yeah.
Yes, it's on YouTube as
And,
well.
you know, one other thing I would suggest, since you mentioned what should people do, if there are written works that you value, if there are books that you value, make sure you have a physical copy of that book.
Yes.
Don't just count on your Kindle or electronic copy of it. Make sure you have a physical copy of any book that you think is important and valuable and worth saving.
Amen. Amen. Where can they follow you? YouTube?
RuthInstitute.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube. Those are the main places where you can find us, and our newsletter, like Christine said, that's where we can really control the information the most, because we know we can talk directly to you, and that it's a lot harder for the tech lords to censor us there. So
Right. It has been my pleasure having you on. I have enjoyed this, and I am going to ask you to come back on, and I know you'll say yes because
Sounds good to me.
we are kindred spirits in this.
Exactly, exactly. Thanks so much for having me, Christine.
You're welcome. And for all of you, please come back. I think you know how I end my show. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you to live your life. Do you remember?
Sunny side up.
She remembered. Sorry.